Nerve structure. What is it and why is it so important? Well, today in this video, we're going to answer those two questions. Hello, I'm Chris, and today we're going to discuss the importance of nerve structure in your dog. So when I have a client that calls me up and they have problems with their dog, one of the first things that I try to figure out is what's its nerve structure like. So in order to understand that, let's back up for a second. So when a dog is born, they're born with a predetermined set of genetics and a nerve structure that we can't change. Genetics is what we look at. That's what gives us our breed, the size of the dog, if it's a hunting dog, a retrieving dog, protection dog, a tracking dog. But nerve structure is what we live with. Nerve structure is what determines how a dog responds to a situation the very first time they encounter it. Everything after that is a conditioning process. So the importance of understanding your dog's nerve structure is actually what allows you to understand what drives them to do what they're going to do. So every dog across the board, they only have three worries in life. They want to know what's expected of them, where are they safe, and where's their next meal. If you look at the core of all three of those, it has to do with survival. If they don't eat, they could die. If they don't know what's expected of them, they could do something wrong and they could die. And if they walk into a situation for the first time, or hear a new noise or a smell for the first time, they want to know if they're safe. Well, the quality of their nerve structure is going to determine how they handle those situations. So, say you have a dog that has a super confident, strong nerve structure. That means that they technically believe the world is made for them. They don't have a care in the world. They're going to go run and explore, say hi to people, play with other dogs. You can basically take them anywhere that you go, and you don't have to worry about your dog showing signs of aggression or barking at people or running away and bolting. Now, if you have a dog that's on the weaker side, doesn't mean that they're a bad dog, but it is important to understand what their nerve structure is so you can learn how to be the leader that your specific dog needs you to be. So if you have a dog that has a weaker nerve structure, that means that they're going to perceive things as threats that aren't. And so in those moments, when they perceive something as a threat that isn't, doesn't matter that it's not a threat. To them, it's as real as it gets. And in that moment, they only have one of four options to choose to try to stay safe, or one of four actions. And that is avoidance, submission, fight, or flight. Avoidance is when they turn their head and look away and they say, "You're not there." Submission is when they maybe lower their head down, go down to the ground, and they say, "I submit to you." Flight is when they try to turn tail and run. And fight is any form of aggression, whether it be barking, growling, showing of teeth, nipping, or biting. And it's always in that order. Sometimes it might take a dog years to go through that. Other times it might take the blink of an eye. Now, there are different levels of quality of nerve structure. I like to put a number system to it. So on a scale of 1 to 10, with 10 being super confident and 1 being neurotic, what we look at is we look at what's called recovery time. So if you have a dog that's really confident and they don't perceive things as threats, unless they're real, your dog's recovery time is instant. So say, for example, you're going to a parade and you have your dog with you. And they're in Cody, Wyoming, they're going to have the mountain men going and shooting off their muskets and stuff. And so if you have a dog that hears an abrupt, loud sound like that, a gunshot, for example, and this is important for people that want to go hunting with a dog. When the dog hears that, instantly, is it avoidance, submission, fight, or flight? If they have a solid nerve structure, it might startle them, but the recovery time is so fast you don't necessarily even notice that they were bothered by it. But say you take a dog, so that dog might be a 7 to a 10. But say you have a dog that is, say, a 6, 5, or a 4. You might have a dog that you see react to it, they jump, maybe they hit the end of the line, maybe they run away for 10, 15 feet, but then they recover really fast and they're able to take it in and see that it was just a sound. Now, if you have a dog that is on the lower scale, again, it doesn't mean they're a bad dog, But if we understand that maybe we have a dog that's in that 3, 2, and 1 number system, we can then also help bring them along and help build their confidence through strong leadership and guidance. But a dog that is going to be in that 3, 2, or 1, they're going to sense something as a threat, and it's going to stay a threat until they go through the gamut of avoidance, submission, fight, or flight. Now, a good example of progression of a dog that sees something as a threat on a regular basis when it's not. Say, for example, your dog is out in the yard and somebody's walking by. They see that person and they immediately think, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm not safe. And so the genetics of the dog gives them more predisposition to bark. If they bark once in that moment, and because the person wasn't a real threat, and that person continues to walk by, the dog, because they're an in-the-moment animal, thinks that it was that action and only that action that kept him safe. And so the next time somebody comes by or they perceive something as a threat, they're more apt to bark again because in their mind it worked for them last time. So then they start to become bold in that. And so they bark, bark, bark. And then it gets to the point where they might rush the fence and just really start barking, even maybe with other dogs, and try to fence fight because they're becoming so confident in that action, bold in that action, when in reality, there was no threat in the first place. And so we really want to understand when we're trying to help our dog through life and be that leader that they need us to be, that we're able to see it for what it is and then be able to learn how to counteract that and show them that fight doesn't keep them safe, but avoidance and submission will. Now, the reason why we don't want to go to flight or want them to think that flight works is because there's nobody out there that wants to run the risk of having your dog flee and now you got to go 3 counties away to pick them up. So ideally, as leaders, what we want to do is we want to be able to invite them into different aspects of our life and have them choose to avoid or submit in those scenarios because that is socially acceptable. But when you have a dog out there and you're walking them on a leash and they're barking at everybody or barking at every other dog, or they're trying to get that, that person that's going by on the skateboard, you end up having a dog that shows that you technically, or shows that you don't have the control that maybe you should have, and that your dog could be a dangerous dog. And that makes people nervous. And so if we can't change a dog's nerve structure through proper communication and leadership, what we can do is we can start to help guide them and recondition them to be how we want them to be rather than how they've learned to be or want to be naturally. Now, there's some misconceptions out there when it comes down to seeing a dog with a weak nerve structure. Now, one of the reasons why we cover a weak nerve structure so much is because there's so many dogs that I get. Over half of the dogs I get in for training come in because they have a weak nerve structure. But some misconceptions out there are this. I get people that call me up and they say, my dog is really protective of me. Well, the question that I end up asking them is, in that moment, was there a real threat? The answer 99.99% of the time is no, we weren't under a real threat. And so then I have to explain to them that it's not because your dog, it's not protection, it's fear-based. There's times when you could be walking a dog and they see something that you're walking towards, and so they stop and then they start barking and they back up to you to touch you. And a lot of people think that the dog is trying to get in between you and the threat so they can protect you. But in reality, they're trying to feel for you to make sure that you've got their back. And that's what pack support is. And so it's important in that moment to not praise our dog for that because we're actually praising the wrong thought process, the wrong action and frame of mind. So majority of the time, your dog is not being protective. Now, out of all the protection dogs that I've ever worked, and in fact, that's how all of this started, was working in Schutzen or competing in Schutzen. A dog that is a good protection dog is a dog that is going to be completely friendly until there's a real threat. But so many people go through their life without ever seeing a real threat. If they have a protection dog, They should never see their dog in protection phase. And so it's really important that you should have a dog that can navigate life and see it for what it is, and not be under a misconception that everything out there is to kill it. Another misconception is a dog will grow out of it, or a dog was abused at a young age and that's why they act the way they did. But if you have a dog for any length of time, say that you adopted the dog from the shelter and that dog is showing these signs of fear, it's not because it was abused. If it was, then you would actually see it get better. But if it continues on or gets worse, it's because it's the dog's nerve structure. It's not something that happened in the past. Now, the reason why it doesn't get better later on is because, remember, if a dog is choosing an action like fight to try to stay safe, and in its mind it's working, it's actually going to get worse. Remember, I said barking, growling, showing of teeth, nipping, biting, in that order. When a dog becomes confident in the bark, then they start wondering, or they start feeling so confident in that, then it turns to a growl. And then if somebody tries to show them that they're not a threat, and they actually continue to move towards that dog to maybe pet it, to show that it's not a threat, that dog doesn't see the intention of that person. All they see is this threat is continuing to come towards them. And so when that person reaches out, the dog realizes bark's not working, growling's not working, now I have no other option but to nip. And then if they go and nip and bluff at the person and the person pulls their hand away, the dog thinks, okay, that's what I need to do next. And then it gets to the point where they become confident in that nip to where you actually get that bite. But a fear bite is not something where your dog even has the courage to stay in the bite. That's actually a good thing. It's not good that they're biting, but it's good that your dog doesn't have the confidence to stay in that bite. Normally a fear bite is when the dog will run behind somebody and pop them on the back of the leg, or they'll nip the fingers in the hands when that person is reaching out and touching them. So it's really important that we take care of this, or that we see it for what it is, handle it properly so it doesn't escalate for the future. Now, like I said at the beginning of the video, how you can see what the quality of your dog's nerve structure is put them in a situation that they haven't been before. And I'm not talking about just a lot of chaos going on. I'm talking about just a simple leave your home and go to somebody else's house, or try to walk that dog into a place in public, a building or a business that allows you to bring your dogs in. Some people get a misconception of what their dog is, because when the dog lives in the house and they start to learn that laying in this position, or if I do this in this house, this is where I'm safe. Some of you have dogs that if you put them away when you go to work and they start baying and crying and whining and scratching at the crate or trying to get out of the kennel, or they start to destroy the house, and it's because they don't feel comfortable on their own. But if you want to know the quality of your dog's nerve structure, take them out, make loud sounds, go to where kids are riding bikes, go to where there's other dogs, be safe, but watch your dog's behavior. Are their ears pinning back? Is their tail tucking? If it is tucking, how much is it tucking? Is the line of hair going up their back? That's all showing signs of nerves, which means that they're stressed, they don't feel comfortable, they feel threatened. And that should make us really start to be aware of, even if we're putting our dog into situations where that dog is stressful, that we don't need to put him in. Unfortunately, not every dog out there can handle everything society throws at it. So if our desire is to be the best leader we need to be for our dog, we need to be able to understand that we either need to find a way through finding somebody who does really good formal obedience and good structure that's really clear to give our dogs positions of safety when we're out, or reside in the fact that maybe we have a dog that is going to do much better at home rather than trying to take him everywhere you go. Hello everyone, my name is Chris, and today we're going to talk about dog communication. Now, it's super easy to get off on a tangent when it comes to this, so I'm going to try to keep it very specific and succinct, so that way it doesn't ramble on. So when dogs communicate, they communicate in only two ways, verbal and physical. And the first thing we're going to cover is verbal. So when dogs are verbal, you have barking, whining, and growling. And that's really it. But depending on what's going on in their mind in that moment is going to determine why they're barking, why they're whining, and why they're growling. And those are the parts that we're going to cover when it comes to the verbal, the positive and the negative aspect. So there's different types of barks. If you end up having a dog that's barking, it's going to be a lot of times it's going to be for one of three reasons. If they're stressed or they're afraid, you're going to hear them bark with a high-pitched strain to it. So it's going to be like a woo, woo, woo. When you hear that bark, you know where your dog's mind is in that moment, and that is they're stressed. They're afraid of the situation that they're in or the thing that they see that could be a possible threat. So if you end up hearing that bark, just know it's not a protection bark, it's a fear bark. Now, if you have a dog that is barking and it's very calm and confident, then you're dealing with a dominance type bark or a protection bark. It's going to be more of a ba, ba. And what they're doing is they're confident in themselves, they're focused, but they're letting whatever it is they see as a threat, that they're the real deal and not to be messed with. Now, you also have barking because of drive. So if any of you have labs, say for example, a retrieving dog. You might have a lab where you're throwing a tennis ball and you're sitting there holding it and you've got a dog in front of you just barking. It's because that drive is building up so much energy that their tail's wagging, they're maybe jumping up and down, but they're also barking because they know that if they do, there's a good chance you're going to throw that ball. So it benefits them to bark. But ultimately what creates that bark is that there's so much energy created in their body through drive, the retrieval drive, and the chase, the prey drive that causes them to chase the ball. They can't contain it, and so it comes out as a bark. Now, there's also whining and howling. If you end up having a dog that's whining, a majority of the time, it's because of stress. When a dog is under stress, again, that builds energy in the body and it has to be released somehow. So a lot of times it'll come out as a whine. And if it's just a soft, easy whine where it doesn't look purposeful, they can't help it. But when that whine happens, you need to understand it's because in their mind, they are feeling uncomfortable in the situation that they're in. And that whine is a result of that stress energy needing to be released. Now, a dog that howls, a lot of times, again, it's because they're unsure or they feel alone. And so it's natural for them to howl because they're trying to look for others in their pack. So if you leave a dog at home, for example, and you go to work and you come back and your neighbors are saying, man, your dog was howling all day long, it's because they were trying to get their pack coming back to them. There are certain breeds where that is more common to hear, for example, hounds and huskies and malamutes, but it's important to understand why a dog is howling. A majority of the time, it's because they don't feel safe on their own, and so they're projecting their voice out there going, hey, here I am, come to me. And that's why you end up having a dog that howls. So if you understand that it's created really because of stress, then it helps you then do what's needed to try to comfort that dog or put them in a place where they feel more secure. And then the third verbal that we mentioned was growling. Growling is a warning. So the example that I use is you have dog A has a bone, dog B wants that bone, so dog A growls. That's a verbal warning. Get back. If dog B doesn't heed to that growl, then dog A is going to physically lay into dog B. But it's important to understand what the growl is. The growl, again, is a warning. The question you have to ask yourself is when your dog does growl, is it justified? If they're growling because they're trying to possess their food from you, that's not acceptable because that's possession aggression. If they're growling at another dog because that dog is getting too close then they're going to growl, and hopefully that other dog gets it and goes, you know what, I'm just going to leave you alone. Because beyond that growl, the only real other option that dog has is to engage in a physical fight. So it's important to understand that growling is simple dog communication. But if it's done at the wrong time and to the wrong person or to another dog that might be part of your pack, which is in your home, if you as the leader don't want what comes after a growl, you have to learn how to fix why the growl is happening in the first place. Now, the physical aspect of dog communication. A lot of times what you'll see or what you'll find is dogs will use their body a lot. So you have some dogs that are jumping on people or jumping on other dogs or slamming into them or even pressing in. When you have dogs that are jumping and slamming into you or another dog, what they're doing is they're showing a lack of respect for your body space. And what they're doing is they're trying to assert their dominance. They're saying, I have the freedom to do this. And that is a way for them to show where you stand in their life when it comes down to, are you the leader or are you not? So a dog that jumps on people and is really pushy, all they're doing is saying, hey, stop whatever you're doing and give me what I need. Now, if you have a dog that's pressing into you, there's a good chance that it's for safety. If a child, for example, say the first day of kindergarten, and your child doesn't want to leave you, and what they're doing is they're pressing into you, they're maybe holding onto your hand or holding onto your leg, they're doing that for safety. And so if you have a dog that, if in certain moments and you think that they might be stressed and they're pressing into you really hard, or they're trying to get on your feet or trying to touch you somehow, that's really what it is. They're trying to get to where they're safe, because as long as they're pressing into you, they feel that now you've got their back and hopefully you would keep them safe. So if we're in a situation where you don't want a dog pressing into you, again, you have to understand why they're doing it. And if you're the one that's able to say, hey, look, we're not in a situation where you are at or where you are threatened, where your safety isn't threatened, get off of me. You're fine on your own, just be. And that's one way we can start to help build our dog's confidence, is by showing them that they don't have to press into somebody or climb up onto somebody in order to be safe. Now, if you see a dog that is that lowers their head or maybe rolls over on their side or on their back, what that is it's submission. If you see two dogs come together that are meeting for the first time, you might see one lower down, or what they're doing is they're making themselves small and they're trying to let that other dog know that they're not a threat. They're small. They're submitting to the dominance that they sense in that other dog. And so some people think that is that's driven by fear, but in reality, it's simple, everyday dog communication. Dogs can sense when people are dominant, when other dogs are dominant, and if they don't have it in them to try to establish their dominance on those other dogs or people, you're going to see that dog be submissive. And so don't be worried if you see that. It's not happening because it's abused, or it's not happening because the dog is necessarily afraid. It's happening naturally. It's an act a dog can do. It's a way that they can show that they are not a threat to whoever it is they're in contact with. So now let's talk about body posture, and we'll start with the ears. If you end up having a dog that has a set of ears where you can tell that they're nice and relaxed, that means that their mind is relaxed. A lot of times you'll see that most when dogs are getting ready to go to sleep, or they're just hanging out with you, maybe on the couch or something. But if you have a dog where their ears are pinned back, they're showing that they're stressed, which could be getting ready to go into fight, but it's mainly caused because of fear. It goes along with the tail. If the tail is tucked, for example, what they're trying to do is they're trying to take away the appendages and become small in their body. But that's only going to happen when a dog senses a threat. And again, whether it's a real threat or not, if the dog thinks it is, to the dog, it's as real as it gets. So if you see a dog's ears pinned, they're showing that they're unsure of the situation or the object that's in front of them, whether it be another dog or a person. But when those ears pin, it's really important that you don't allow whatever they're perceiving as a threat trying to go towards them, trying to prove to them that they're not a threat, because the dog doesn't know the intention of the person. The dog just knows that whatever they're perceiving as a threat is coming towards me. And so that pinning, that warning sign, maybe the lips start curling a little bit. But what they're doing is they're giving a visual warning, better stay back. Now, along with the ears, we talked about them being relaxed, and that's pretty easy to notice. But sometimes if the ears are up and forward, that shows you where they're focusing on. So if a dog is a confident dog and they are they hear something that maybe they want to go towards, or maybe that they're in the house and they see or they hear something that might be outside, that they're unsure of what that sound is, you're going to see them go up and their ears are going to be pointed and trying to figure out what that sound is and where it's coming from. So when you see your dog's ears forward, it isn't about happiness. It's about engagement and trying to find out what it is, but they're also not showing signs of stress. So when their ears are forward, your dog is interested in what it is, but they're not in a fearful state. Now, another way to know if your dog is nervous or not is that hair that sticks up on the ridge of their back. So anytime you see that hair come up, it's strictly nerves. The dog is in a situation, it feels uncomfortable, it's trying to make itself look a little bit bigger, and so that line of hair goes up down its back. That means that your dog, in the moment, whatever's going on, whether there is a real threat or not, your dog is showing that it is nervous and feels unsafe. And so in that moment, if necessary, get your dog out of there, because if they're feeling nervous or feeling threatened, you don't want a situation to arise where your dog chooses fight to try to keep itself safe. Now let's talk about the tail. If you have one dog that meets another dog and that tail goes straight up into the air and curls, if it can curl, but if it goes straight up into the air and it locks solid, that's a dominance position. And so in that case, we then want to immediately look and see what the other dog's tail is doing. If that tail goes straight up and is locked, you are now running the risk of a possible fight, not because of fear, but because of dominance. Now, if your dog's tail goes straight up and then it starts to relax and starts to waggle a little bit, a wagging tail is drive, play drive, hunting drive, retrieval drive, herding drive, whatever it might be. That's energy in the body that has to be released somehow, and that's what causes the tail to wag. So when our dog starts to walk to us and we don't say anything and we don't do anything, they might be nice and relaxed. But the minute we open our voice and we start going, "Hey buddy, how's it going?" And now he starts to get that safety drive in to where he knows when he comes up to us, we're going to start petting him and loving on him. Now you're going to see that drive for safety that goes up, and that energy has to be released. And that's a lot of times when you'll see that tail wag. It's one of the reasons why we look at the wag and we're not worried about it. It doesn't matter really what's going on with the facial expressions or what the ears are doing. When a tail is wagging, we know the dog is more calm in their mind. They're showing that they're not fearful of what's going on, which means that they're also more than likely not a threat. Now, when you have a tail that's relaxed, which means that it just has a natural, nice slope down, then that means the dog's mind is relaxed. They're not in drive. They're not looking to go play. In fact, majority of the time you see it is when a dog is walking nicely and properly on a leash, and they're not in hump mode, they're not in track mode, there's nothing going on them that they're afraid of, and so they're just relaxed. And you see it in the demeanor of their body. Their ears are relaxed, their tail is nice and relaxed. And when we're moving with our dog and it's not playtime, hunt time, tracking time, that's ultimately what we want to see. Because it doesn't matter where you are. If you've got a lot of stuff going on around you and your dog is showing a relaxed behavior, it doesn't get any better than that. Now, a little bit earlier, I talked about a dog's tail being tucked. There's only one reason a dog tucks his tail, and that's because he's scared. He's perceived something in his environment that he feels threatened by. And when that tail tucks, if it tucks just a little bit, you know he's a little nervous or scared. But if it tucks all the way up and under, and it's just solid, and it looks like it's pressing as it's doing that, it lets you know that your dog is very fearful and very insecure of its surrounding. So when you're able to see that, again, you're able to maybe do what it takes to get your dog out of that environment so that way he's not stressed any longer than he needs to be. Now let's talk about stress and what the body shows when a dog is stressed. Anytime a dog is stressed, it builds energy in the body. And that energy is released quite a few different ways, whether it's shaking, sniffing, panting, yawning, whining, chewing on things. It's all ways that the body can release or is forced to release the energy that is created by stress. So if you watch your dog laying down and it's not cold in the room, but they're shaking, it lets you know that in their mind, they feel pressure or stress. And that shaking is a way for them to release that. If you ever to watch somebody give a speech and they're not comfortable giving a speech in front of people and they're holding a piece of paper and it's shaking, it's the same thing. People release stress all different kinds of ways. Shaking, talking too much, chewing on a pen. They're getting that energy out somehow. Well, dogs are no different in that. So if you understand that if a dog is whining, for example, and it's this simple, soft, low whine that's fairly consistent, you know it's stress relieving the body and there's nothing they can do about it. And so it would be unfair for us to try to stop them from doing that. But if that whine goes from a light whine to an open mouth complaint, now it's purposeful and we can tell the dog fairly that that behavior is unacceptable. Now, with all of that said, the importance of understanding dog communication is because we're not dogs. We have to be taught this for us to be able to understand it. So it's important that when we understand why a dog's body is doing what it's doing, that allows us to then be able to start to become the leader that our specific dog needs them to be, which in turn gives them the best life possible and allows us to enjoy them and invite them into many different aspects of our lives. Are you abusing your dog? After watching this video, you might be surprised at the answer. Today, we're going to talk about, are you abusing your dog? So it's important to understand that dogs are designed to live in a black and white world. So for example, when dogs are around other dogs or they're in a pack, they communicate perfectly to each other. Because they don't reason and they don't run off of emotions, there's no area where they can miscommunicate. So if a dog is designed to live in a black and white world and we don't know how to communicate to our dog in a way that they understand and respect, and we're not consistent and we reason and we run off of emotion, then we're more apt to create what's called a gray world. It's a world where our dog is a little unsure of what is acceptable behavior and what isn't in different situations. If our goal is to be the leader that we need to be for our specific dog, then we need to do everything we can to make sure that we create a black and white world for them. So that's what we're going to talk about today. So there's 3 ways that you can abuse your dog. There's the physical/verbal aspect when it comes down to the negative of each one. And then you have the mental aspect, and then you have feeding. So to start off with, one of the ways that that we miscommunicate through the physical and verbal aspect is verbal communication and physical communication. When we're talking about a correction or negative, each dog is going to have its own level. It's going to be specific to them, because ideally when we correct a dog, we want to find that level of correction that's just enough they want to avoid, whether it's a verbal or a physical. And if we go above and beyond that and it's too much, or we let our emotions get away from us, and we correct our dog out of emotion, or we just correct them too hard because we think they're a bigger dog and they need a harder correction, then what ends up happening is we send our dog into panic. And a dog in panic can't think, and at the same time it puts them into flight, or it can even turn them into defense mode. But in that moment, what we're doing is we're creating a gray environment because our dog is feeling unsafe. Now, I would say probably the most important one is the mental aspect. So an example would be this. Say that you get home one day and your dog runs up to you and you're petting it and everything is great, but then you see that your dog is pottied over there on the floor. And so in that moment, you immediately change your voice, you pottied, and you maybe grab your dog's collar and you drag him over there. Some people will rub their nose in it. Don't do that. But the dog, because they're an in-the-moment animal, think that they're actually being corrected for coming to you in the first place. They don't know that they're being corrected for something that they did a while ago because they're an in-the-moment animal. So you end up creating a distrust in the dog in that moment. Now, where people go wrong in that is when they get home the next day, and this is where, again, we allow our human thought and reasoning to cause a problem in this, is that when we get home the next day or the next couple days and the dog is real standoffish and we aren't quite sure why, and so we invite the dog into us, we try to show him that it's okay and that it's safe to come to us, and we start loving on our dog again. But then later on, or maybe we look over in a different spot and we see that they've pottied. So now we correct them again and they went, aha, I was right, I can't trust you. But in your mind, you're sitting there thinking, oh, you were standoffish, so you knew you did something wrong, and that's why you didn't want to come to me, because you didn't want to get punished for it. So it's a vicious circle when we try to put our own human thought and reasoning into things, which is why it's so important to understand how your dog works. So another way you may be abusing your dog without realizing it is through feeding. Dogs are designed to have a natural body weight, which means that they're going to be slightly on the lean side. The reason why that's important is because a dog's organs are only designed to filter out toxins for a natural body weight, which means that if your dog is overweight, there are toxins that are constantly running around in the system, and over time, that's where you start to end up having cancer and arthritis and fatty tumors and skin issues and ear issues and eye issues, all kinds of different problems. So if we want to provide the best home for our dog and we want to be the leader that we need to be for our dog, then we need to also feed them correctly and make sure that we're not slowly poisoning them over time because they're overweight. Now, the biggest cause of all of this, when it comes down to abusing a dog, we don't do it on purpose, but what it comes down to is it comes down to a lack of education, a lack of knowledge of how to properly communicate to our dog and how dogs work. It's why my first videos are the basis of how dogs work. Is because if you don't understand your dog and you don't understand what they need you to be specifically for them, then you're behind the curve when it comes down to being the leader that you need to be for your specific dog. So one of the best ways to fix it is get educated. Whether it's checking out our webpage and watching some more videos or on the YouTube channel. Our website is AAAdogtraining.com. It's TRIPLE it's spelled out. Now, if you have questions, my contact information is on there, and so you can call me and we can talk about your specific dog and situation. But until then, the very best way to avoid abusing your dog is, and I tell all of my clients this, if you question whether or not you should correct your dog, don't do it, whether it's a verbal correction or a physical correction. And the reason why is because it's better to be wrong and not correct your dog than to correct your dog and be wrong. If you should have corrected your dog and you didn't, your dog just got away with something. But if you correct your dog when you shouldn't, you're driving a wedge in your relationship. You're creating that gray world where now they can't trust you. And that causes problems in other areas as well. And the last thing you want to do is put stress on your dogs. Hello everyone, my name is Chris, owner of AAA Dog Training. What we're going to talk about today in this video is about leadership. So in order to do that, we're going to look at it through the eyes of a dog. So if we start from when a dog is born, they are starting to experience things that are brand new in life. And when they're with the other pups when they're with their mom, because it's a perfect relationship, dogs don't miscommunicate with each other, so it's a perfect relationship. As that puppy starts to experience sounds and smells and sights and feeling vibration in the ground or whatever it might be, those puppies are looking to the mom to know what to do and what's expected of them. And the reason why that's important to understand is because that's what a dog does through its whole life. Dogs only have 3 worries in life, and only 3. Remember, what's expected of me, where am I safe, and where's my next meal? So when the puppy is starting to grow up and it has its mom, it's in a perfect relationship because there is no miscommunication. And when something happens, depending on the dog's nerve structure, is going to determine whether or not they look to the mom. Was that a threat? Is this prey? Can we go after this? Whatever it might be, whatever the rules are, to the puppies, it's perfect because the mom doesn't waver. The mom lets them know if they think that something is scary and she doesn't show any signs of threat, they might run to her, but she's not adding to it. Now, once the puppy gets to be that 7, 8, 9 weeks old, that's when we introduce them into the life of a person. And so you get your puppy, you get in the vehicle, and you're heading home. Now, once you're in the vehicle, depending on, again, the quality of the dog's nerve structure, if they're unclear or uncertain what's going on, remember in their mind, the minute you get in that car, they're wondering, am I safe here? What's expected of me? So when you're driving with them or you're going home, especially if you're holding them, and we see them shaking or they're whining and we're trying to make them feel better, we're doing it with the understanding of our human reasoning, which is what we would, again, do with our child, which is to try to comfort them and reason with them. But the dog doesn't understand. They don't know our intentions in this. All they're hearing is maybe the inflection of our voice, you're okay, which is saying what's going on in your mind and what you're doing right now and feeling is correct. So on top of it, we're holding them, we're probably petting them and massaging them, which is more affection, which is, again, letting them know that not that they're okay, that's what we intend, but we're actually praising, again, the action and the frame of mind they're in. The female in the litter, the mom in the litter, doesn't ever do that. If there's no threat, she acts like there's no threat. She's not over there trying to coddle her puppies. So as time goes and we get our dogs into new situations and we think now we got to socialize them, which a lot of people think is just taking them out and doling them up to the environment and giving them as much experience as possible. And to an extent, that's true, but it's not the complete picture of it. So when you have a situation where your dog is experiencing all these new things in life and we are not communicating to them like we should, we are now promoting behaviors like barking and whining, running to us and trying to maybe jump on our body for safety. The reason why we talk about dogs that don't have solid nerve structures is because if you have a dog with a completely solid nerve structure, this is not something that you necessarily have to worry about. But majority of the dogs out there, it's rare I get dogs in for training because they're nice dogs. I get dogs in for training because they're normally barking at people, or they're hard to handle, or they're nipping at people, or they're running away at everything, or maybe they are super confident with tons of drive and the people just know how to harness that. So when it comes down to being the proper leader you need to be for your dog, you have to understand why your dog's doing what it's doing, but you also, most importantly, have to understand how to communicate to them in a way that they understand and respect of what behavior is acceptable and what isn't. So when we're talking about seeing the world through the eyes of a dog, anytime they come up with something new, they are looking to you. And so that's where we get into the importance of what real leadership is. So let's go back to the wolf. Okay, so if you have a pack of wolves, you're going to have the alpha. Now the alpha is everything to the rest of the pack. He's the one that tells them when they're going to go hunt. So he's satisfying the food aspect. He's the one telling them what's expected of them right now. They're either hunting, tracking, or migrating. And he sets when they're going to be doing all of that. And then if they get into a situation or something is new, they're looking to him. Are we safe? How he handles himself is going to determine how they handle the situation. So let's take, for example, and I don't know if I've used this example yet in any of the other videos, but say that you're in some type of town that is really well known for crime, high crime and shooting and things like that, and you're by yourself and you have to walk down a street that's a mile long and you know what you could possibly run into. The weight of responsibility on your shoulders is incredibly great because you're solely relying on yourself for your own safety. So there's going to be a whole lot of stress and it's going to be, it could possibly be a pretty awful situation. Now, say then you have somebody who is specially trained. Say you take one of our special forces. So they're specially trained, they've got all their gear on, they're loaded for bear, and they look at you and they say, okay, I'm going to get you through this. When you start walking, because of their leadership skills, or you're going to realize that after a while, you may still be a little tense, but yet now you're starting to watch this person and you're looking and you're seeing that they're walking confident, that there isn't anything that they're showing signs of that's a threat yet. And so you start to relax. And in that process, you're starting to get the idea of what a dog needs out of its owner. So when you're walking down that street and all of a sudden, if the person that you're behind starts to crouch down, maybe start to walk differently, speed up, slow down, whatever it might be, your senses are immediately going to be like, oh, what's going on? Is there a threat? And so the reason why I use this as an example is because this is, in reality, what your dog is going through in life. And it's up to us to learn how to become the leader we need to be for our dog, so that way we can give them the best life possible. We get dogs for one reason. Well, we should get dogs for one reason, and that is to invite them into all aspects of our life. And so that way we can enjoy them, they can have a wonderful experience, but ultimately we got them for us. We didn't get our dogs so we could live our life around them. We got our dogs so we can invite them, incorporate them into the different aspects of our lives. You take on that responsibility of becoming the leader you need to be for your dog. And it's not done through making your dog sit before you feed it, or making them wait before you walk out of a door, or telling them to lay down 1,000 times because they're just getting up when they want to. That's not leadership. Leadership is knowing how to provide 3 things. Food's a no-brainer, okay? Where's my food? That's a no-brainer. What's expected of me in this situation? How can you let a dog know that if you don't know how to communicate to them? Learn how to communicate to them in a way that they understand and respect. And where am I safe? When you walk into a situation and you can see that your dog is stressed, walk strong. Be that leader that your dog needs to be. Be the special forces that's walking you down that path or down that road that is letting you know when there's a threat and when there isn't. Now, the great thing about our lives is the majority of the time, there is no real threat. So therefore, if you see your dog where you think they're acting protective, they're not if that's not a real threat. If you're not being attacked, there's no real threat. So your dog shouldn't be acting like there is one. Learn to be strong. Learn how to read your dog's behavior. Learn how to communicate. Learn how to be that leader you need to be for your specific dog so they can have the best life possible. Create that black and white life. These are the responsibilities that you took when you got them. So with all that said, dogs are meant to be a blessing to your family. Gain control, invite them into all aspects of your life. And I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Bye.